Welcome to Friday's Premier League Today. Normally, we'd be building up to another big weekend of Premier League football. But today, one story overshadows the rest. After 22 seasons, Arsene Wenger has announced that he will step down as Arsenal manager. In a statement on the club website, he said, "After careful consideration and following discussions with the club, I feel it's the right time for me to step down at the end of the season. I'm grateful for having had the privilege to serve the club for so many memorable years. I manage the club with full commitment and integrity. I want to thank the staff, the players, the directors and the fans who make this club so special. I urge our fans to stand behind the team to finish on a high. To all the Arsenal lovers, take care of the values of the club. My love and support forever."
I think that the English football is going up and that the Premier League is one of the most important leagues in the world now.
Great honor, 20 years. I think it shows their total commitment from the club and faith in me. I found the values at this club that I like in the game. The club gave me a challenge when I was nobody. Highbury in my heart is special, and was the soul in there. Through good times and some less good times, but of course it's a great privilege, especially in my job, to last for such a long time, and very honored for that, and thank you very much.
Ian Wright and Matt Scott are here. Wrighty, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a sad day. We knew it was coming. I didn't think it was going to happen. The closer we got to the end of the season, I was thinking that, like he normally does, he finishes his contracts out. But it seems to me that probably, I think that if I had to take a guess, they probably said to him, "We'd like you to move on now," and they maybe put it in a way that he's resigned or he's stepped down. But it is a very sad day for Arsenal Football Club, because what he's done for the club is very difficult to actually put into words, and that's why you'll see people continuously being so utilising so much about what he's done for us.
Is it the right time, though?
I think it is the right time. If I'm going to be totally honest, I think to save him the vitriol that he's had to deal with in respect to the abuse from fans because of a team, for me, that has underachieved for a few years. Yes, they've won the FA Cup. I feel that it is time. Maybe it should have been 2014 without him getting, like I say, the stick he's been getting. I would have liked to have seen that, but I think, it's a sad loss, but we knew it was coming.
Matt, as an Arsenal fan, there's been division amongst the supporters. There's been tensions between them and the players and Arsene Wenger, in particular, tensions between the supporters and the board. Does this feel like a first step towards trying to mend that?
Well, interestingly, I mean, we've seen the empty seats, a quarter of the stadium empty this season, which is unheard of for the entire time that Arsene's been at the club since the late 80s. It's not been like that. And yet today, the box office has collapsed under the weight of people trying to renew their season tickets. So this is, that rupture does appear to be healing. And it took something like this for that to happen, because I think the depth of feeling was so strong against Arsene Wenger. And that's such a shame, because exactly as Ian says, it is impossible to articulate exactly what he's achieved and accomplished with Arsenal. Some unprecedented things. The fact that he is the last man in the Premier League to have joined in the 20th century. We're talking about the end of the end of an era, the closing of a chapter for English football, full stop, let alone Arsenal Football Club. And
it feels as though his time at Arsenal has, because it's pretty much coincided with the existence of the Premier League, has sort of symbolised the development of football throughout that time. And in many ways, he sparked that change. For people who don't have the context of pre and post Arsene Wenger, what was it like before he came into Arsenal?
Well, I think you have to go with the nutrition, the diet, the training schedule. It was so different. From Friday, you might have been doing something totally different in respect of the running and the kind of running you're doing, to, like, I don't know, the next week, the Monday, you're jumping over hurdles.
This is what Wenger did.
Yeah, you're jumping over hurdles. Your diet's changed.
From what? So what was it like before Wenger?
There's a lot of chicken and beans and steak. I used to have steaks with an egg on it, or chips was something that people could have. You could literally have anything you wanted for a pre-match meal. And he was flabbergasted when he saw, because he had to come and watch us against Borussia Mönchengladbach in what they call the Europa League now. And he came and watched us have our food. And you could see he was shocked at what we were eating. But we didn't realise how the change was going to happen. We had the tablets, the creatine, the vitamin injections, the training, the specialists coming from France to do training exercising and stretching exercises, all sorts of stuff. We used to send some people off to have training with Tibers Dow, who unfortunately died not too many years ago, one-on-one training to get you to a certain level of fitness. And the timing of the training sessions and exactly what you had to put into those training sessions in respect of output and what you would see. And it was, like you mentioned, revolutionary, because we could feel something was happening.
Because this all seems fairly standard now, but how did you react to it, having gone from, that sort of old-fashioned culture of, like you said, steak and chips as your pre-match meal, the drinking culture that was there at Arsenal at the time, a sort of very regimented training session under George Graham. How did that group of very strong-minded players react to Wenger's changes?
Well, obviously, there was, especially the older English contingent, because Patrick, Dennis, Nicholas, all the French guys, they literally just... He said, right, we're not doing that no more, we're doing this. These are the tablets you have to take. And they went, bam, straight down the line. And there's a lot of people who are like, I'm not taking those. What are they? What's this? What's that? And it took a while for everybody to get on board. I remember rooming with Dennis, and Dennis would have all the tablets ready to go. And he'd take his tablets, bam, do stuff and that. And I would have my tablets, and I'd still have one from yesterday, or one from, I hadn't taken them all. And I say, Dennis, do you take? He says, I take them like regimentally, bam, bam, done. If Arsene Wenger would say to Dennis, you've got to be in bed by 8 o'clock, he'd be in bed by 8 o'clock. And all those things contributed to the output in training. And that's what he wanted. He wanted everybody to be on the same page. And by the time we finished, and obviously everyone saw what happened in '98, we were on the same page because we realised how fit we were. And what was happening as well was people would ask, especially when we'd meet up with England, people wanted to know, what you eating? What's this I'm hearing about? The tablets you're taking? What's these vitamin injections? What
were these tablets? You keep talking about like
B6,
supplements?
Yeah, supplements. B6, B12, creatine, pure vitamins, pure, vitamin D, C, any vitamins that had something behind it, a letter behind it, we were probably taking it. And you could feel in training. And what we did notice as well is that when we wasn't taking it at the same level as the French, you could see that they were more energized and fitter and stronger in training. And so once we all started to take it, you could see we all went to the same level, and then people saw what happened in '98. And
we saw Arsene Wenger coming out to meet the media for the first time as Arsenal manager. There's the apocryphal story, which isn't true, about the newspaper headline that said Arsene who, but it was reflective of the attitude at the time. Where they brought him in from the J-League, it didn't seem like the big appointment that Arsenal fans wanted. Did you think he'd be there 22 years later?
Oh, goodness me, no.
Later?
No, absolutely not. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson said, he's taken over a big club, or at least they used to be a big club. But he's coming over here, he doesn't know the first thing about English football, he'll never last. That is the greatest manager the Premier League has ever seen, saying that of Arsene Wenger, and that is probably his biggest error of judgment, because he became his great rival for the first 10 years. I don't think any of us could have imagined that would happen. And he is an anomaly in the current era of the Premier League. The fact that he is still there today and will remain so to the end of the season.
23 games later.
It's extraordinary. And, Amy Lawrence has put this into words. I don't think that this will ever happen again, not at the biggest clubs in the world. And Arsenal is certainly one of those. I mean, Arsene did benefit a lot from the change in culture in the club as well. The captain at the time, Sir Tony Adams, he had been one of the leaders of the drinking culture that you mentioned, Kelly, but he decided to go sober, and that helped him, as you point out. You know, the arrival of the other foreign contingent who were prepared to do everything. So he did have a few lucky breaks that he was joining that club at that time, which enabled him to build that legacy. But what a legacy! What he did.
I think as well. By the time he came, once George Graham, and like I mentioned to you, Kels, about tired of being shouted at, tired of that old-fashioned English. Come in the dressing room when you're winning and people still slaughtering you simply because they want you to go out in the second half and play well. He totally got rid of that. He wouldn't have any shouting or anything like that. And it was refreshing because, like you mentioned, Tony Adams, we didn't have Tony Adams for 2 years. You know, he was all over the place with what was going on with his private life and that. Once he got back and we started to do everything, Arsene Wenger came, he didn't placate Tony like Rioch did, and everybody did before, George Graham, Rioch, Stewart. They let Tony get on doing what he's doing. Arsene Wenger stopped it and arrested it, and Tony dealt with it, and we got our captain back and we were ready to go again.
But the change in style as well, how do you do that with a group of players who know each other so well, who've been, as you said, trained down to the tiniest movement by George Graham? And I know Bruce Rioch had come in the meantime, but it was George Graham training that was instilled in those players. So how do you go about changing the style?
It was, you know something, when we started to have our first training sessions, especially on the full 11, and it was mind-blowing how much energy we felt like we have and how much we were using the energy in a good way with the ball. Like, I would have to make at least 5 runs into the channel, even if the ball didn't come. But Arsene Wenger wanted me to conserve energy and only make sharp movements and wait for the play to build before you made your moves. And it was quite easy to adapt because the players were good. We had good players. And then once we realised the quality of Patrick, or obviously we knew about Dennis, quality of Patrick, the quality of Manny Petit, Mark Overmars when he came in. Once we realised, this is just when we started to train how he wanted us to train. Everyone's thinking, yeah, how's Tony Adams going to get on with that? How's Steve Bold going to get on that? They saw what happened with the last goal against Everton, how we're going to get on. But it was refreshing because I actually felt more energized because I didn't have to do so much movement and I could just move in short bursts and still get my space. It was brilliant.
I think that goal against Everton deserves some particular description, actually. It's where Steve Bold comes to the halfway line and he finds Tony Adams in the inside left position with a raking long pass.
I still can't understand now what Tony was doing there, why he went. But
someone who was so disciplined in terms of where he would be.
Exactly. So what it is that Arsene Wenger, he gave you the license to go and play. He wanted you to play. And that's the kind of thing he would say in his 5 minutes after at half-time, what he would say, he wants you to go and play and express yourself. And this is why even now, I'm thinking back to the goal when Steve Bold chips it through to him, can't understand why Tony went, but I remember
for a left foot volley.
Yeah, for a left foot volley.
22 yards.
Half volley.
Exactly.
You know, so I still think to myself, when we used to be in training, and he would see the opportunity to go forward and he'd say, go, and then people just go, people just play.
And of course, that style is synonymous, of course, with Arsene Wenger. And it's been reflected in the statement from Richard Scudamore of the Premier League, who said it's hard to encapsulate the enormity of Arsene Wenger's contribution to Arsenal Football Club, the Premier League and football generally over the past 22 seasons. All of Arsene's teams have been a joy to watch. His 2003-04 Invincibles will go down as one of the best in English football history. His innovative coaching and player development methods transformed the English game just when it was needed most. Arsene's view on all aspects of the sport are always worth listening to. His generosity of time and consideration for others, generating huge respect throughout the game. Whatever the future holds for him, he deserves nothing less than our total gratitude and best wishes for his own personal happiness.
That's magnificent.
It's a reflection of a lot of the comments that have been coming out about Arsene Wenger that talk not just about the change that he made, not just at Arsenal, but, you know, effective changes you were describing across English football, the style that his teams have always played in, but also the fact that he's an intelligent, a thoughtful, a considerate human being as well. Is that your personal experience?
Yeah, I remember he could easily, anything. You sit down and speak to him and he'll if you wanted to find out about Brexit, you just sit down with Arsene Wenger, he'd probably be able to just sort it out for you in no time at all. Anything, politics. Yeah. anything world sport, anything you want to talk to him about, he is really, really clued up on. He's somebody that he's almost intimidating when you speak to him, because he's so highly intelligent in everything he speaks about. But the flip side of that is that he's very clumsy as well. So what was really, he could easily just trip down some stairs, and like, even I was watching and made me laugh when he lifted the trophy.
Yes.
His medal nearly ripped his head, and it just went around the back of him, because those are the kind of things he would do as well. It kind of balanced up his major intelligence.
Who was the character that you used to compare him to? Was Inspector Clouseau?
Yeah. Ray Parlour made that up for him.
Yeah.
We used to call him Clouseau, and it was because of the, when he made a joke about...
It was the Pink Panther films.
Pink Panther films, yeah, and that's what we used to compare Arsene Wenger to, because he had that kind of Peter Sellers, Inspector Clouseau kind of comedy vibe about him.
Because that's something you don't often see from Arsene Wenger. I mean, your dealings with him is he's always very, as we said, in fact, highly intelligent man, very informed, but you don't tend to see. Mind you, actually, I think that was a joke he wasn't necessarily in on. But you don't tend to see that sense of humour.
Oh, it's
clearly
there.
Yeah.
Definitely got a sense of humour. I mean, some of the quotes that he came up with. I had, the great privilege of spending a lot of time in Arsene's company every week with the press conferences that he'd hold. And Wright's experience is exactly right. He was articulate, intelligent, engaging, generous with his time, particularly when Arsenal were doing very well. And that time when he had that contretemps from week in, week out with Sir Alex Ferguson just made the soap opera narrative of the Premier League so good. I remember some of the quotes he came up with. One of the things he proved us, Sir Alex Ferguson, wrong in something, I can't even remember what it was related to, but he said, we asked him, have you got the apology that you deserve from Sir Alex Ferguson yet? And he said, no, not yet. Maybe he's sent it by horse. And obviously, in reference to Sir Alex Ferguson being such a horseman. But he had great things. Everybody thinks they've got the prettiest wife at home, he said of Sir Alex Ferguson when he'd been referring to his team. So he knew how to needle people, but it was very, very clever, very understated, and he never went over the top. One or two times when he did lose his temper, not least when he had a dispute with Jose Mourinho when he referred to him as a voyeur, and I personally misunderstood that and underestimated the depth of his feeling, and I tried to sort of, in the way that you always felt you could, get Arsene to brush it off in a humorous fashion. But he got very, very upset with me, and you can understand why that was. I mean, here he is having the physical row with Jose Mourinho several years later. There's been profound enmity between them, and we can see that in Arsene's face there. Those two don't like each other at all. So he's definitely had his battles. But he's never stood down. No. He's a man who doesn't look anything of a physical specimen, but he's prepared to fight for his team, fight for Arsenal Football Club, and that's been something that definitely characterises him.
As you say, he's had all these rivalries with opposition managers. Let's hear from a couple of the current crop.
He was there for so long. How many years was he exactly there? Yeah, that's long, man. and very, very successful, and that's how it is. And maybe in the last few months, not everybody was happy anymore about this or that result, but that's normal and part of the business. But he always developed teams, brought always fantastic players in. Was a dominating guy, mid-90s, maybe early 2000, when he was really winning pretty much everything. Played wonderful football, so I admired his work always. It was always brilliant. Since I'm in England, it's a little bit different because now we had to challenge.
All my respect for what of course he has done. So Premier League is what Premier League right now, thanks a huge personalities like Arsene. There are not too many. So the Premier League is the Premier League thanks what he has done when he arrived, and his vision about the respect for the football. I wish him all the best in the future. Hopefully he can involve in a different way in the world football, because these kind of people always are necessary.
Obviously, I have been talking well about Arsene Wenger for for a while the other day in the press conference. So I think that when he came here to England to do things in the way that he was doing things and to win like he was winning was a massive achievement. And then has been so many years, and I said in the press conference before the game, so someone that his behavior has been always quite good. All the managers will have some problems sometimes, but quite good, an example for everyone. But especially for a foreign manager like me, when I came and we started, I would say, fighting with some of the big names in England, he was fighting before, he was winning before, and it was really difficult to do that, and he did really well.
He's one of the manager that they have a great influence in football, because in every moment in his idea of football, he tried to play good football, to play a creative football, an offensive football, and I think that he deserves a great tribute also for this.
What's interesting is so many managers, some of whom have spent 1 season, 2 seasons in the Premier League, they know about Arsene Wenger. They know about the Arsenal teams that he produced right back from when he joined 22 years ago. Was that one of the things that he'll be remembered for, that he'll be credited for at Arsenal, is changing the perception of them?
Well, you can hear what they're saying about the philosophy, and he stuck to it. And you hear Pep make the point about the way he plays and how he sticks to the way he plays. And even up to this day, he's still trying to continue in the way he plays. I personally don't think he's got the players to do it at the moment. But the fact is that the respect that you can see what he's got from all those managers is because of the brand of football that he produced, and the fact that he was a visionary with when he came into the Premier League to when he leaves it now. And that is why it's so important that the Arsenal fans, who were getting very, very vitriolic with their abuse, understand now, when they do see all these tributes, exactly what he's done for the club, and how fortunate we were to have him for so long.
Is there any way back now for Arsenal in terms of the style of their football? Is that it? Is it so synonymous with the club that will forever be the way that fans expect them to play?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, because where they came from. I think Bruce Rioch deserves some credit for the transformation, because he did take it away a little bit.
You won't get that
from George Graham's approach. He did want you to keep it on the floor a bit more, which didn't necessarily help Wright's goal scoring ratios. but yeah, that was the first step on the road. But he's taken it to a completely different level, where actually, to a certain extent, the football became the overriding factor, and the result almost felt at times to be a secondary consideration. But let's not forget, this is a man who's won so many trophies, even with these detractors that we've heard of. In the last 5 years, he's won 3 trophies. Yeah. He's won 7 FA Cups. This is about the Premier League, of course. That's the name of this channel. But, he's won 7 FA Cups in 20 years. That's one fewer than Tottenham in 120. Now, for Arsenal
not
fans,
everything has to come back to Tottenham. Not everything.
That's a good one to come back to Tottenham. That's a good one.
Yeah, that for Arsenal fans means an awful lot. Yeah. He has, and Spurs, I think, have won 4. They're 4th on the FA Cup, winningest, if you can use that phrase, table. So that's a hell of a legacy, and it's important winning that trophy, and he's done it an awful lot of times, time and time again, when people didn't expect him to. Winning against Chelsea, denying them a double. Nobody saw that coming. This is something that Arsene Wenger can look back on very, very proudly. In the recent years, I think there was a fallow period for 7 or 8 years. They moved into that stadium, and it didn't help the fact that there was a middle band around there which detailed all the trophies Arsenal ever won. Yes. 13 league titles, doubles along the way, to which he was an architect. And yet it sort of was a reminder to the fans in that stadium year in, year out that list of trophies wasn't growing. There was still a great big red space in that middle band. But he's been filling it. And that is something that the next man is going to have to live up to, and it's not going to be easy. Well,
let's head to the Emirates now, where football journalist Amy Lawrence is waiting to talk to us. Amy, you've followed Arsene Wenger's career from the beginning, as we, well, in terms of Arsenal, from the beginning as we all have here in the studio. And we're right in the middle of a discussion about the fantastic achievements and the positive changes that he made to Arsenal. But the news today, did it come as a surprise to you?
I would say it really did, and that's just because it's out of character from what we expect of both Arsene Wenger and of the club. And, you know, although this has been, people have been kind of angling towards this and wondering when and if and how for some time now, Arsene Wenger's mantra, not even while he's been at Arsenal, but even prior to that in his previous clubs, has always been, I don't break a contract. I never break a contract. So the idea that something has triggered him to actually do something I think he, as a man of principle, he holds in quite high esteem, this idea that he has always signed a contract, remained utterly true to it, to its conclusion, and then take things from there, means that things have really reached the stage where I think underneath that skin, when he looks in the mirror, something has changed.
Do you think it's about him and how he feels, or do you think it's about the future of the club?
That's a really good question, and I think we have to wait until we have the chance to ask Arsene Wenger himself. Reading that quite short announcement that he made, I think what really stood out to me was he talked about his love of the club and he talked about the values. He's a man who really, really cares about those values that he feels that he's helped to inculcate at the club. He's often talked about an Arsenal DNA, and that's maybe something that didn't really exist before Wenger was here. People used to say boring Arsenal. Wright will remember the kind of image of the club in the old days. And he totally transformed that image, and he has often spoken about it. He travels the world and he meets people and they talk about someone being an Arsenal type of player or having an Arsenal style of football. That identity was something that is associated with him and how he likes the game to be played and his vision for football, which at its very best, when you look back to those title-winning teams, Arsenal played a really beautiful, electrifying style of football. The fact that it's been quite hard to replicate that in the latter years has been where I think, despite all his best intentions, thinking I can make this happen, I can make this happen, I can get back to that, perhaps he's just decided that, you know, things have gone too far away from the ideals he has for his Arsenal DNA.
And as much as he's made all these changes at Arsenal, as you said, that have changed the DNA of the club, it's been a reciprocal relationship. What's he given to Arsenal and what have Arsenal given to Arsene Wenger?
Well, Arsenal have given to Arsene Wenger something that no other manager in the last sort of decade or certainly recent years of football anywhere has, which is absolute autonomy. It's a very unusual situation. I mean, a lot of clubs obviously are run on the model where you've got a director of football, you've got so many staff, you've got perhaps owners or people running the club, CEOs who are much more involved or like to interfere almost. Arsene Wenger has had free range to run this club absolutely how he wishes for 22 years. That's an incredible thing. And you look around the world of football and that does not exist anywhere else. And I don't think it ever will exist anywhere else. And that's why the breakup of this relationship is going to be so deep, because you just don't find those kind of bonds between a club and a manager that last so many years as this has. And I think it's going to take a whole lot of time for the club to get used to being without Wenger and for Wenger also to get used to not being manager of Arsenal Football Club. And I think it's that fear of what happens next that's maybe stopped Arsene Wenger from walking away in the past and kept him going and kept him trying to revive the most golden times that he's had at this club.
Amy, he's obviously got very deep ties, and you know him well, very deep ties to North London. Do you see him staying here? I mean, one of the things was that he had a young child here. She's now grown up, gone through university. His wife is, they're no longer together. Do you think that Arsene will remain part of North London, or do you think he'll now think about moving on somewhere else and a big job somewhere else in the world of football?
All the vibes coming from him in the last few years is of a guy who doesn't feel he's finished. I think there probably was a period where if things had been a bit more positive, he would have liked to stay here and finish his managerial career here. But because he still feels he has the energy, he still feels he has the drive, maybe a new challenge somewhere is something that will re-engage him and relight his own personal fire. I think offers will be on the table for him, so it's really whether or not he likes the idea of them. I remember speaking to him years and years ago, probably after the the first double in '98. I do remember seeing a certain Ian Wright with his medal round his chest. I'm not sure I've ever seen a player look prouder to wear a Premier League medal. But Arsene Wenger at the time, when we talked about legacy and what he might want to do in the future, obviously it seemed like light years away at the time, saying, well, all I like really is to see talent develop and get better. There's nothing he likes more than being on the training pitch, being with players and trying to get them to do football better. That's really the simplicity of it for him. All the talking to the press, all the things he has to do with sponsors, all the other stuff that as a modern manager you have to do, he would drop all that in a heartbeat. I mean, he does it because it needs to be done, but his love is being out on the pitch with the players, focused on the game and only the game. And he said at the time, I would quite happily go and work in Africa with young kids and just watch them try and develop their football. I don't think he'll be ready to retire until physically he feels like he can't get up in the morning and go to a football pitch. As for Arsenal, obviously they've got to rebuild themselves at the end of what was like the last emperor's reign. And there will never be a 22-year manager ever again, never mind here, anywhere. So the example of Manchester United and after Ferguson, it shows that it's not going to be an easy ride, whoever they choose.
Amy, do you think it would be a club appointment or an international appointment? Do you think he's got the energy to do another club, or do you think it's an international appointment would be the one where he'd go for?
I mean, it's a good question in the sense that I never felt in the past that international football was really for him, because he wanted that day-to-day involvement. Yeah. And he's so obsessed with football, he's watching it on, streams from here, there and everywhere all the time. What's he going to do in the kind of month or 6 weeks in between one international get-together and another? Maybe he feels he's slowing down a little bit physically, that it would suit him. But I think if a big club is available for him, I wouldn't be remotely surprised if he gives it a go.
And Amy, what about the club? Have they already started taking steps towards being prepared for life without Arsene Wenger?
Yeah, I think those changes started when they brought in behind-the-scenes changes. And that was an issue of friction in the last couple of years at Arsenal, where I think at board level they were keen to start introducing new influences on the football side, whether that was different coaches, whether that was people working with the team in terms of preparation, whether that was a kind of director of football scouting, all those areas. The fact that they've, in the last 6 months or to 12 months, brought in a new head scout, sort of in charge of all talent spotting from Borussia Dortmund, and that they've brought in from Barcelona a new, essentially, director of football, though we're not allowed to call them a director of football in case it upsets anybody. The not director of football from Barcelona. I'm sure that these people are making their presence felt, and that's quite possibly linked in with everything that we're talking about today.
And Amy, just to look back a little bit as well, because we're going to talk about the Invincibles in some detail, of course, here on this programme about Arsene Wenger. You wrote a book about that extraordinary season. One, will it ever be repeated? And two, how much of what Wenger is about was shown on the pitch that season?
I mean, if you have to pick something that sums up what Wenger meant to football here and perhaps what English football meant to him, I think he might go for that perfection. And what was lovely about it is that nobody thought it was possible. It was something that he held as a personal dream. He said it was something that since boyhood he had as an aspiration. There could be nothing more perfect than going a whole season without losing. And when he first sort of brought it into the conversation, which was about a season or two early before it actually happened, he was laughed out of town. He was asked the question, could your team go a season unbeaten? And about the next 5 minutes, Wayne Rooney, as a very young man, smashed in an incredible goal for Everton, and it was all over, and he was mocked. It was considered ludicrous and arrogant. And within another season, there he was on the pitch, not too far from here, on a day almost as sunny as this, watching his team complete 38 games unblemished. And they played with a swagger, they played with a style, they played with a hatred of losing. And that blend of being a little bit of the beast, but an awful lot of beauty, was really the perfect Wenger football. And I think that will live on in the history of the game for all time.
Amy, lovely to talk to you, and very appropriate that even the bandage on your arm is in Arsenal colours today.
Didn't think that was in shot.
Thank you very much, Amy. Good to talk to you. Amy Lawrence there did write that fantastic book on the Invincibles, who we will be talking about in terms of Arsene Wenger's achievements and where does that one rank? Is it right at the top? But of course, there have been so many fantastic moments with Arsene Wenger in charge of Arsenal.
We have to go back to the genesis of our relationship because, you know, we were friends for 8 years before he became manager of Arsenal. And I happened to just coincidentally bump into him. He was just passing through the old Highbury Stadium. Arsene was standing there, you know, in a long trench coat and with these sort of odd glasses on, and he certainly didn't look as if he was a football coach. I thought, this guy's unusual. Been to university, got a degree in economics, he studied a bit of medicine, speaks 4 languages. You know, he's not your average football manager.
Good afternoon.
Here is a man who was so dedicated, so knowledgeable and intelligent that he really hit the ground running. He brought in a whole new dimension, a whole new thinking to the club. He changed all their diets, all their training methods, you know, what they're eating and drinking. When we were developing our training ground, he was responsible right down to the last teacup what it was going to be like. He is absolutely compulsively concerned, devoted to the club. That is his life. As a teacher, he gets so much satisfaction on seeing one of his protégés coming through from the youth team, coming through into the reserve team, getting into the first team. So he will make an average player into a good player into a very good player, and a very good player into a world-class player. What he has done in English football is quite remarkable. He deserves an immense amount of credit. He is still hungry, still got that fire in his belly to win, and that's why it's difficult for him to stop. And at some stage it will be time for him to hang up his whistle, which is right, and his stopwatch, which is the first bit of kit he puts on every morning. It's up to him. He will know when it's time to give it up. Arsene is a football purist. He's got a lovely expression. He calls it possession with progression. He loves the passing game, and it's a joy to watch. It is an art form. It's ballet.
Hello, welcome back to Friday's Premier League Today, where we're reflecting on the news that after 22 seasons, Arsene Wenger will be leaving Arsenal at the end of this one.
It's just like that cannon in front of the stadium. They're never going to remove it.
When I arrived, nobody knew me. It was quite a test for me.
He was just passing through the old Highbury Stadium, and I happened to just coincidentally bump into him, you know, in a long trench coat with these sort of odd glasses on, and he certainly didn't look as if he was a football coach.
Good afternoon.
Here is a man who was so dedicated, so knowledgeable and intelligent that he really hit the ground running. He brought in a whole new dimension, a whole new thinking to the club.
I banned the chocolate bars. Because it was quite funny because I sang on the coach, we want our chocolate bars. They adapted quickly.
The impact that he had on the club and on the Premier League too. A lot of teams tried to copy what Arsenal were doing.
He is absolutely compulsively concerned, devoted to the club. That is his life.
And I believe I sacrificed a lot of my personal life to do that.
He is a teacher, so he will make an average player into a good player into a very good player, and a very good player into a world-class player.
What a goal! It is more than amazing. I don't think we will see that again. 810. Wow.
What he has done in English football is quite remarkable, and he deserves an immense amount of credit.
I was lucky to work in a club who has identified values that are vital for me.
Arsene is a football purist. He's got a lovely expression. He calls it possession with progression. And it's a joy to watch. It is an art form. It's ballet.
Even though he might not be one day the manager anymore, and it will happen, he should be at the club forever.
It's up to him. He will know when it's time to give it up.
Ian Wright and Matt Scott are here to talk Arsene Wenger and Arsenal. The two seem inextricably linked. We saw some fantastic moments from his Arsenal career there. Which do you think, Wrighty, was the best season, the best team that Arsene Wenger has produced at Arsenal?
I think the Invincibles. I think I was being involved in the '98 team, and we were just striving. So you're on the inside looking out, and we did have a very, very good team, which he came in and he inherited a lot. But the team what he built was sensational.
Matt?
Sensational.
I'm going to say the 1998 team that Ian was part of, because of where it had come from. I mean, you know, with the best one in the world, you know, they were servants of Arsenal, but the likes of Steve Morrow and David Hillier were not of the level of the players that Arsene brought in very early on in his career and turned into a machine, just so fast, so energetic, so penetrative in their football and able to fight anybody who came at them. That was an extraordinary experience, watching them from where they had come from.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that team, because we're joined on the line now by Lee Dixon, former teammate of yours, of course, Ian. Lee, we're talking about Arsene Wenger and the difference that he made to Arsenal. What difference did he make to you when he came into the dressing room?
Wow, how long have you got? 2 hours?
Go for it.
It was an instant love affair, really, with him. We didn't really know anybody like him before. Obviously, we'd been brought up, right? He had many a run-in with George Graham, and it was a very authoritarian type football club then, but was very successful. And we bought into George's ways because we were young and hungry, and we didn't really know any different. And he educated us on how to be a team and how to fight and how to defend, and we were very successful at it. But then when he left, it was kind of, okay, well, what happens now? And we kind of learned how to win, and certainly everything I learned as a defender, George Graham taught me, but everything I learned as a footballer, Arsene Wenger taught me, because he just walked in the door and almost threw the shackles off of the type of football we'd been playing, and just was very, very simple about how he went about his job. Just go out and play and eat this food and stretch like this, and you'll play forever, basically, and you'll play with a freedom and a brilliance that, you know, Matt just talked about that '98 side, and I think Gary Neville has mentioned that was the best team he played against, and I'm massively biased towards that team because I didn't play in the Invincibles. So, but I honestly think that '98 side had the best of everything, and it still had a back four and a goalkeeper that was kind of at their peak. And then he brought these players in that nobody had ever heard of. You know, Petit, Vieira, Anelka, Grimondi, and added to the base, knew the French market inside out, made the players fitter than they'd ever been. Certainly I felt fitter at 32 than I did at 22. And then just put a smile on everybody's face and let everybody go out and play. And it seems very simple, but that's what he did. He's not a complicated coach. He doesn't complicate coaching sessions by moving players around. He's got his own unique style of how to manage a team, and it's unusual because I think you have to have a certain amount of football intelligence and a bit of experience in the team in order for it to work. And I think we've probably seen that towards the end of his tenure that it's not quite worked. And the reason is he's not an information coach in that respect. He doesn't move players around on the pitch and say, do this, you've got to do it that way. Or he's an organizer, he's a physiologist. He gets people really fit. And then you kind of have to go out and learn it on your own on the training pitch and work off the players around you. And I think perhaps that's his only weakness. If we, you know, today's to talk about weaknesses, probably isn't, but is just that little bit of when things are not going right tactically is perhaps his Achilles heel a little bit. But he's an absolute legend, and what he's done at the club, I can only be thankful that I played 6 magnificent years with him, and every day I went into training, I had a grin on my face.
And Matt's pointed out, when we talk about his time at Arsenal, it's pretty much divided almost exactly in half, the first 10 years and the second 10, 12 years. Yeah. But even in that time, the 3 FA Cups in the last 5 years. But how has it been for you, Lee, watching the drop-off in league performances, watching the discussions between the fans, the differences that they've had with each other, the problems that they've had with Arsene Wenger? How have you found watching all that happen?
Very difficult. And also being part of the media, it's, you pay to give your opinion, and the best thing, or the most easiest thing for me to do, would just sit back, because I love the guy, and Wright, he does the same, is to sit back and not say anything, because, it's like a relative going on hard times. You kind of like, you want to try and help him, but it's been difficult. I think the split has been pretty much, as you said, half and half, and that first half of his tenure was built on a base that was there, and then from players, as I mentioned before, that nobody knew about, and that he tapped into a market that he basically owned. And as the market caught up with him, and everybody else started knowing the market, and that kind of caught up with him a bit, and so recruitment in the second half has perhaps not been as exciting or as valuable to him. And also, we have to forget, don't forget that he went through a period of 6-7 years when they were refinancing and building the new stadium and letting all the best players go. And he didn't want to come out and moan about it. He didn't say, the board's not giving me any money, I can't do this, I can't do that. He kept his counsel. He was, the dignity of the man is incredible. He went through that period and just, this is my job, this is what I do, and didn't moan and groan. Got through that period and then started to reap the benefits of being able to buy, Ozil and Sanchez and the players of that ilk. But also the competition then had gone through the roof, and everybody, there was the top 6 all of a sudden, as opposed to it being the top 2. And teams with far more firepower than Arsenal were then in the marketplace that had been saturated with money. So it's been, if you look at it like all planned out, it's been very, very difficult how he navigated the waters and kept his dignity, and he has. And as you said, it's been quite difficult at times, because the results ultimately are the most important thing, because always will be. And I think now they said he's going to retire at the end of the season, you're not looking at the results now, although they're still important and there's still a lot to play for this season. You see past the results now, and you see the legacy that is Arsene Wenger. And I think that's the best thing about this announcement, is that the pressure's off him in that respect, and people can now start to love him again. And I think that's the best thing that will come out of today.
Yeah, that's very true. Lee, you mentioned that he's not an information manager. He doesn't really manage the 90 minutes. Do you think his greatest weakness, arguably, is the fact that he never really delegated to anybody else who would do that kind of role for him? He's had the same backroom staff, Pat Rice accepted, who had to retire through injury, around with him for the last 22 years. Unlike Sir Alex Ferguson, who constantly had that sort of creative destruction of bringing new people in to have new ideas alongside him throughout his tenure. Do you think that's arguably where Arsene has fallen down, unable to retain the primacy of position that he had earlier in his career?
Well, I think it takes all sorts of characters to make any sort of team, and Wright will tell you we had some varying characters in all the sides we played in, and some were introverted, some were extroverted, Wrighty, and then some were loud, some were quiet, some were sulky, some were, some of the French lads that come in and wouldn't speak for weeks on end, and there's no different than Arsene and Sir Alex Ferguson. They're completely different characters. I think when he looks back on his career, and he will say, would I have done it any different? He might, if he's a very honest man, and he might look back and say, do you know what, maybe I could have delegated a bit more in certain areas. And I certainly certainly believe, and obviously I'm good friends with Steve Bold, and I see the the mistakes and the repetitiveness of the mistakes that go on defensively. And I go, surely he can see that. And if he can't see it, why doesn't he get Steve to sort it out? You know, pretty simple. You've got one of the best defenders at the club as his assistant. Why wouldn't you do that? And you've kind of got to point that out to him and say, I'm sure more educated men and knowledgeable men than me have pointed it out to him and said, well, you know, why don't you just do that? Because surely he can sort it out. So that, yeah, it's obviously something that stands out in his career, where you go, yeah, of course, you know, Tony Adams has offered his services in the past, and he's not a defence-minded coach. He's very attack-minded. So you would say, well, that's surely a weakness. And I'm pretty sure if I sat down with him in, you know, 5 years' time, we're having a cup of coffee, and I say to him, would you change that? Maybe you'd give something, you know, a bit more leeway to your coaches to do something in the areas that you're not proficient at. And I think he would agree with that. I really do.
But that attack-minded philosophy has brought us some fantastic football and some fantastic players as well. Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. See you, Wrighty.
Take it easy, Mo.
See you, mate.
Mo?
Yeah, Dickie Mo.
What?
I'm just calling Dickie Mo.
That's his nickname?
Yeah.
For any reason?
No, there was a character in Pink Panther called Dickie Mo.
Did everybody have a Pink Panther nickname?
There's a cartoon character. There's a cartoon character in a me and Kevin Campbell were finally, we were watching it in, where's on a pre-season, might have been a pre-season, but we were in a hotel together. And there's a character in a Pink Panther, the cartoon, called Dickie Mo.
Right, okay.
And that's what we started calling Lee.
Okay, there's a theme developing. We probably won't pursue that one very much more. But you know, Lee talked about the players that Arsene Wenger brought in, saying that people didn't really know them when he brought them in. How instrumental do you think he was in? We're so used to now having the best players from around the world playing in the Premier League. How influential was Wenger in this?
Well, I think that you know, we don't see Patrick Vieira's name on there, but like I remember when
the reason for that is because he'd arrived
literally just
the other reason is because there's 2 pages of this.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right, okay.
But the thing with it is that when he did come, you know, he obviously had Patrick had already been sounded out.
Yeah.
And Nelka had already been sounded out. Remy Gard was the first one to come. And then as we found out as the years went by, he already earmarked people like Cesc Fabregas, Robin van Persie as well. And, you know, so he knew what was going on. And like Dicko said, he knew the market. And he knew exactly what players to bring into Arsenal to continue to play a brand of football that he knew that they would deliver. And like I said, he had the heads up on that market, which in the end, everybody else started to fish in the same waters, and you know that's when we started to lose out a bit.
Vieira did come in just before Wenger.
That's right. He was there because Wenger arrived in September 1996, and he joined during that the pre-season
because Wenger had highlighted him.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, so yeah, but I mean, he was still. I think the greatest change in Arsene Wenger's career, and Lee pointed it out, was the new oligarchy arrival. You know, the likes of Roman Abramovich pouring his hundreds of millions into Chelsea, and the recognition around the world that football was something that if you poured some money into, you get a big brand return. Because even in 2002, he was able to compete. You know, one of the stars of the World Cup had been Gilberto Silva. He'd gone and won it with Brazil, and he went on to be a linchpin of the Arsenal Invincibles side. An incredible footballer. And he'd been able to get hold of him even after the World Cup. He'd started at that event, and he presumably was a target for so many clubs across Europe. You can't see that happening this time. You can't see Arsenal now getting one of the stars of whoever goes on to win that World Cup being able to blow other teams out of the water. And that's going to be, you know, that is going to remain an issue for Arsenal in the period after Arsene Wenger. As Amy pointed out, this is not going to be a panacea. Things aren't going to change just because Arsene Wenger has moved on, because all of those ailments that Arsenal have been carrying over the last 10, 12 years remain, and arguably in recent times have got even worse.
Well, if the significant recruitment in that first title-winning season for Arsene Wenger meant that there was a real balance between the old and the new school, when the Invincibles came along, it was very much the team that Arsene Wenger built.
The champions Arsenal, standing on the brink of the extraordinary, something unique in modern football, going through a whole season undefeated. It's Ruud van Nistelrooy to win it for Manchester United, and he's hit the underside of the bar, and he's missed again. Amazing.
Character, bottle, they're showing it all now.
They've done it again. A very significant victory indeed.
Henry, sidestepping one, sidestepping two. That is brilliant. And the Arsenal juggernaut rolls effortlessly on.
This is White Hart Lane. This is the day of destiny for Arsenal Football Club. Arsenal are the muse, proudly crowned English Premier League champions.
The first side to go through a season unbeaten. The champions are Arsenal. Hail the history men.
The history man, and we heard Thierry Henry saying earlier he doesn't think that will ever be repeated in the Premier League. It was such an extraordinary achievement. When you look at that team, what strikes you most about it? Is it the creative talent? Is it the balance of it? What is the difference between the first team that Wenger built and this one?
First and foremost is that there's only one name on there that existed when he had that 1998 team, and that's Dennis Bergkamp. Mm-hmm. You know, all other 10, you can say that this is Arsene Wenger's team. His one, legacy to Arsenal was that he was able to come up and be rid of a fantastic set of individuals and great team spirit in the previous era. They'd come to the end. They didn't have much of a period of transition. They were still competing. They'd won the double in 2002. So through that time, he was able to keep a winning team. And this one is a completely new generation. I think Dennis Bergkamp, his influence on the Arsenal team is extraordinary, as you were saying before.
He was the glue for everything. And that is why the success what we had, it didn't surprise me that it went on to have the success, the Invincibles there. Ray Parlour should get some credit as well, because he was in that team. He gave them unbelievable balance. But when you looked at that team with Freddie on one side and Perez on the other side, every now and then Ray Parlour might have been on one of the sides. It was a magnificent team. Unbelievable team.
Why was Dennis Bergkamp the glue?
Because he was just an amazing footballer. He was just like, I remember when he came, it just changed the DNA in the club, changed like the start of like the X-Men film, when it starts and all the DNA changes and goes through. That's what happened with him, because he was the first world-class player I personally thought.
This goal was the greatest I've ever seen.
And he was world-class in the way he trained. We knew that with him in the team, things are going to happen now. People say to me about, did he do that goal on purpose? And he seems to score great goals in training. And it's not about doing that on purpose. It's the intelligence and the capability to be able to have the touch what he had and adjust himself to finish how he did. And that is what is the genius about that. And that is what he was. He was a genius footballer.
Let's not forget, in the middle of the 1990s, English football was kick and rush. You had two great big strikers up front. You were one of the exceptions to that law. The likes of Shearer, Ferdinand, those kind of big strikers, Andy Cole, they were people that you could throw the ball at and have them have a tussle with two big strikers. Sutton and Shearer had won the league together in 1995.
Against two big centre-halves.
Against two big centre-halves. That was the way English football was. Dennis Bergkamp played a more withdrawn role, and it was a very different way of playing the game. He and Eric Cantona were probably pioneers of that, and that is why Arsenal and Manchester United had so much success at the time that they did. This isn't coincidence. This is about not just the manager, it's about the players on the pitch and the way that they were able to transform the way that English football was played. And in the end, everybody wanted to have a number 10. You had Juninho at Middlesbrough, of all places. Another player who'd been absolutely extraordinary at a World Cup, and Middlesbrough managed to acquire him. So this is something that changed the game, the likes of Dennis Bergkamp and the way that he played football, and it allowed Arsenal to dominate in the way that they did for so long.
We said that everything Arsenal doesn't always have to come back to Tottenham. They did that season win the title at White Hart Lane, which particularly this season, given that Manchester City missed the chance to do it against Manchester United, seems particularly fitting.
Yeah, absolutely. And having done it in 1998 at Old Trafford. So, you know, these are the things that they were able to do at the homes of their rivals. And it's something that Arsenal won the double in 1971 at White Hart Lane as well. So those things have sort of just a beautiful symmetry about them. And something that's interesting, of course, is that he will finish his Premier League career at Huddersfield, which was the alma mater of Arsenal's previously biggest, most greatest manager in Herbert Chapman, who won 3 titles on the spin at Huddersfield before joining Arsenal and effectively winning 3 titles on the spin there. Although in the final season he died of pneumonia midway through. You know, that is something that if there's one person that you can say Arsene Wenger, is standing alongside, he's on the shoulders of giants with Herbert Chapman, but he really does deserve to be considered at least alongside him, if not even greater.
Matt, how much did the move from Highbury to the Emirates affect Arsenal Football Club, affect Arsene Wenger, and affect potentially what he's remembered for at the club?
Yeah, it came at really the wrong time. I mean, real estate had been the way to make money in English football. You know, the growth of Old Trafford showed that. They built a stadium with 72,000 seats at a time when others were having 35, 36. Arsenal's was 38,000 seats at Highbury. And the amount of money that generated, the fantastic corporate facilities they had, was creating enormous revenues for Manchester United just at the right time. Arsenal, though, sacrificed a lot of... So when that happened, Manchester United could go on and make huge commercial revenues. They could, with that in place, they could then concentrate on expanding their commercial revenue base, and that grows to this day. And that is why they have such financial hegemony over the Premier League in terms of the money they make. Arsenal, though, were 10 years too far down the line. It took them a very long time to get the stadium project underway. The council refused to do things. They looked at moving to Wembley. There were a lot of rows between David Dean and Danny Fitzman on the board. They weren't really sure of what the strategy should be. And it came, like I say, at the wrong time. 10 years of potential financial growth in the commercial segment were handed over to front load the value of the stadium. They took in 10 years of money from Emirates, from the Nike deal, 13 years, on those 2 deals and the shirts. And it cost them dear, because while everybody else was able to kick on and at a time when all the broadcast revenue was coming in, Arsenal, rather than spending on players, as you say, were doing it to service the debts. And that's been a real problem. That aggressive deleveraging of Arsenal has cost them their success on the pitch just at the wrong time. Because if they'd have managed to keep up with the others, they would still be one of the top 2 in the land now. But, that's a lot of hindsight.
I remember having a chat with Ivan Gazidis when we was over in Brazil, and he was telling me about the move from Highbury to the Emirates and how short of cash and how really close to the wall Arsenal did get to, and how, when you look at what Arsene Wenger continued to do with the team and the players he was producing to get into the Champions League, which now you look at and, to get into the top 4 alone was a massive, massive achievement. And in the end, I think that he was he knew the remit as well. He knew that he had to get Arsenal into the top 4 to kind of bring in that monies so as they can use it. So the pressure he was under to do that, without saying anything to anybody. And he took that all on board himself and tried to do it, even when people like myself and everyone was saying, why aren't they buying players? Why are they selling their best players? All these things he took on board and took it on his chin and continued to try and do the best he could for Arsenal, like a good company man that he was. And, now...
As much as he says, Arsenal took a chance on me when I was a nobody, but he also talks about the sacrifices that he's made for the club. For those years...
He could have walked. He could have gone.
They must be the times he's talking about. But then having seen it through and got themselves into a position where they can go out and they can spend money on Lacazette and Aubameyang. And okay, they're not spending, a record amount on a defender like Liverpool. They're not spending $250 million like Manchester United and Manchester City. But having seen through that difficult period, is it because they haven't seen the upturn now that the finances have evened themselves out? Is that what Arsenal fans are frustrated about?
Well, yes, certainly Arsenal fans are frustrated about it, but they've got to recognise that the situation financially isn't all rosy in that garden anymore. You know, OK, it's better than it was. There's no risk of them going to the wall, but at the same time, they're pedalling very, very hard on that wage bill. It's about 65% of their overall turnover. That's a problem. You know, and a lot of the blame, if you can call it that, the culpability, lies at the door of Arsene Wenger. He's gone and bought players that Arsenal shouldn't have been buying at the kinds of money that they were paying. Gary Neville tells a story about Squadron Mustafi from his time at Valencia, where he says we couldn't give him away. Well, if that's the case, and Arsenal went and paid £30 million and handsome wages to that player who, for the best will in the world, is not good enough for Arsenal. You know, it's because Arsene Wenger was doing it all on his own. And that's a problem now that they're trying to rectify through the hierarchy. Amy was talking about Sven Mislintat, who's the chief scout. Raul Sanjay's joined from Barcelona as the director of football relations. And he's called that because Arsene Wenger wouldn't have a director of football above him. You know, they want to get on and do their jobs. They want to go out and identify the players, move on the players who aren't right for the football club, and pull in people who will be for the future. Good young players with a prospect of future resale potentially, or really giving a good career to Arsenal. And the problem is, Arsene isn't happy about their interference as he sees it. So, you know, the job for the next guy is going to be a lot of plate spinning, managing to do that at a budget which really isn't there.
We will be talking more about the present and the future very shortly. We'll also be hearing from Jose Mourinho on Arsene Wenger.
You don't know the way we respect each other, even when sometimes it looks like in some moments we don't. Players that get yellow cards get red cards by aggression actions against each other, bad words during the career, and managers the same thing. In the end, probably are the ones that respect more each other, are the ones that have the problems. Is power against power, is quality against quality, is ambition against ambition. But in the end, is people from the same business, is people that respect each other and respect each other's careers. I know what it means: 3 Premier League titles, 7 FA Cups, and not just that. What he did in Japan, in France, what he brought to the French football, what he gave to Arsenal, even in a period without Premier Leagues, all the transition of the club from stadium to stadium, everything he did, we know what he did.
It's interesting to hear Jose Mourinho because of the altercations that he and Arsene Wenger have had through the years. But as he says, there's more that unites them than divides them. When when looked at from a distance, they may have their personal issues with each other, but nobody understands the pressures of the job better than another manager.
No, I think he's been very magnanimous, and you know what? I would love to know that him and Arsene Wenger. And we've seen the altercations, seen the pushing and everything. I'd love to feel that they do, behind the scenes, phone each other and maybe speak to each other. But
or even in like 5 or 10 years, maybe.
Or whatever, because I can't see it. I would love to hear Arsene Wenger's side of how he feels about Jose Mourinho. Because the one thing that you will get from Arsene Wenger is the total truth in how he says it. It'll be very eloquent and really concise. And so I'd love to hear that. But I think that he has driven them on. Some of the things what Mourinho has said about Wenger, you can see that he despises the fact that the press have not give Arsene Wenger even more so-called stick and stuff like that. You can hear it all the time. So, like I say, I would be really interested to hear Arsene Wenger's side of that little thing there.
He's got to have a book coming out soon, hasn't he, Arsene Wenger?
I'd love to go through that. I would love to go through
We'll all be reading it. We will all be reading it. Coming up, we're going to look at the present and what the future holds for Arsenal without Arsene Wenger.
Fabregas, is he going to make it too? One of the great solo goals in Premier League history.
And Young has scored wonderfully again. At Arsenal's expense again, Robin van Persie.
Back to Friday's Premier League Today, where we're talking Arsene Wenger with Ian Wright and with Matt Scott. Now, last year, Ian went to meet Arsene Wenger and asked him about the legacy he'd like to leave.
If everything ended tomorrow for some reason because a comet hit the world, how would you feel your legacy is?
I think I try to be honest, committed, and loyal during my career here, and that I was not ashamed for this club, and that I leave the club in a position where it can move on. And today's Arsenal is don't know how many fans we have all over the world, but it's a respected and loved club, and I hope that it will become even bigger in the future. That's what I would love to see from, hopefully, from paradise.
Thanks a lot, boss. It's good to see you.
See you.
We're about to find out what the legacy that Arsene Wenger leaves at Arsenal is, certainly in terms of what the fans think of him, because as disgruntled as they've been at times, not just this season, but over the past few seasons, they play West Ham at the Emirates on Sunday. You're going to be there.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to be like?
I think it'll be packed. I think it's going to be confusion there, because there's people who have been very disgruntled for many years, the last few years in particular, who have obviously been like shouting whatever they've been shouting. And now that we know he's going, there's going to be the people who have been supporting him and trying to support the team who are going to be disgruntled because, you know, now they've probably been two-faced about what's going on. What we need is for the Arsenal fan base and Arsenal to be united now. But I think the last few years with the form and what's gone on, and you know, we're not in the top four no more. You know, it's you know, the prices, everything that comes with what's going on at Arsenal at the moment. There's just so much dissension there, and this might be what then now galvanizes the club, because we do need to move forward positively. You know, because I believe that there is going to be some form of drop off once he's gone. Mm-hmm. The next manager is coming in. You're hoping it doesn't work out like it did for Man United with David Moyes, but you do have to feel that something like that might happen. And we're going to need the fans even more for whoever the new person is, the new manager is. And that is why the sooner we can get behind the team, the better. And that's what I'm hoping for on Sunday, that they can start getting behind the team now. Not just Sunday, because presumably the point of announcing it now is to get that lift and to get that positive feeling back around Arsenal between now and the end of the season, and ahead of the Europa League matches against Atletico Madrid, because it's the toughest tie they could have got. But can they go on in this tournament? What a way to end Arsene Wenger's career with his first European trophy, if they can do it. I would hope, Matt, that they could. But when you look at the defensive deficiencies and as players switching off and not doing things against teams like Watford and Southampton and just teams, Newcastle and that, you're looking at a team that's going to have to play against 180 minutes against Atletico
Costa again, and he's destroyed Arsenal so often. And
Griezmann. Yeah. So you have to look at it, and when you look at the away games that Arsenal have played in Europe, yes, they've done well in Europe, but they've not been very convincing. And now you're hoping that this might galvanise them. But if somebody said to me, you have to put a marker down, are they going to do it for the boss? I think there'd be a lot of effort, but whether or not they're good enough to do it, I don't know what's going to change tactically for them to all of a sudden do it. There might be more effort, but tactically, I'm not sure they can. We've talked about the autonomy that Arsene Wenger has had at Arsenal. That won't be apparent in whoever the next manager is to take over at the Emirates. What kind of manager should they be looking for next? A young, up-and-coming, energetic manager, someone established, someone who's an Arsene Wenger type, sort of father figure role that we keep hearing that he has at the club? Who should they go for? What type?
Well, the kind of person that they will go for is somebody who has tremendous integrity, first and foremost, because Arsenal's brand is what they call the Arsenal way. So they're going to have somebody who they can look at this picture of the man up here, on the touchline in his suits, always impeccably dressed, well turned out. That actually genuinely does mean something for Arsenal's brand. So that, first and foremost, much as I'd like to see him one day at Arsenal, I don't think you'll see Sean Dyche in there, for instance. I think you're looking at somebody, in terms of a manager, though, somebody who can properly coach players to do the best in that 90 minutes. Somebody who can tweak things tactically, as you've mentioned, Ian. Where there are deficiencies in Arsene Wenger, that is something they have to do. Somebody who has a good deal of man management and can create a culture and a team spirit that is broken. There isn't that team spirit at that club. They're not fighting for each other. Somebody like Thomas Tuchel would be a very good pick. And
other than personal issues with Sven Mislintat?
Yeah, that's interesting.
From their time at Dortmund?
Yeah, they did share time. Sven Mislintat was his chief scout at Dortmund, and Thomas Tuchel had him banned from the training ground. But I can sort of understand that because, at the end of the day, it's not really the chief scout's place on the training ground. His job is to go and identify new players.
Exactly, yeah.
And he felt that there was two inappropriate relationships going on with the players on the pitch. So that's fine. Hopefully there is a level of maturity there that they can recognise that. But ultimately, if he moves in and that he doesn't see eye to eye with Mislintat, well, he's the guy they've just invested an awful lot of money in. He's the guy who's going to be the manager of the football club going forward, and he's the guy whose opinion will prevail. So I don't think that will be too much of an issue, but I don't necessarily think it will be him anyway. He's looking at PSG.
Jogi Löw.
Yeah, I would be personally disappointed if it were somebody who without club management experience, but obviously somebody who's very close to Per Mertesacker, who's taking over the role after he retires as a footballer next season, or the end of this season, is going to be the head of the academy at Arsenal.
And Jogi Löw, of course, manager of Germany just now, potentially could win the World Cup.
Yeah, we do need somebody.
You look less convinced about that.
I don't think they'll win the World Cup.
I think they're not going to be far away. I tell you, mate. I watched them in the Confederates Cup, and that was their B team. That was their B team, and they were very impressive. But in respects of Arsenal, what they do need that young manager with energy, and he's going to have patience, and he's going to need a good recruitment people around him, because there's a lot of players that need to be moved on, and we need to get the right players in, and that is going to be, I think, a massive job.